across the UK, on DAB, online and on your smart speaker. This is Times Radio, the voice of the Times.
It is 12 o'clock. I'm Hugo Rifkind and this is Times Radio. In a moment, PMQs, but first let's have a look at the headlines this lunchtime. Sir Keir Starmer has been seeking to reassure his fellow MPs that he's listening to them, and he's apologised for hiring Peter Mandelson. There are also questions over Number 10's appointment of a staff member to the House of Lords. The Ukrainian president is expected to announce an election and a referendum on a peace deal with Russia for May. The FT says it follows intense pressure on Kyiv by the White House to wrap up peace negotiations between Ukraine and Russia in the spring. 16 migrants will appear in the High Court later, attempting to block their deportation. The lawsuit is attempting to overturn guidance introduced by Labour to prevent migrants using modern slavery laws to delay their deportation. And Tottenham have sacked their manager Thomas Frank after just 8 months in charge. Last night's 2-1 defeat to Newcastle was an 8th Premier League game without a win, leaving Spurs only 5 points above the relegation zone. There will be more news in an hour, but we'll have a full news roundup at 1 o'clock, of course. But now, live on Times Radio and on the Times YouTube channels, it's time for this.
PMQs Unpacked on Times Radio. Unpacking the politics and cutting through the crossfire.
And I'm joined as always by the Times' chief political commentator, Patrick Maguire. Hello, Patrick.
Hello, Hugo.
Calm week, sleeping much?
I've been sleeping soundly, thank you, but
right,
for a shorter amount of time than usual.
Sleeping soundly for at least an hour a night.
Yeah, indeed, yeah.
And also by Times Radio's very own Ayesha Hazarika. Hello.
Greetings.
How are you?
All right, probably sleeping slightly less than Patrick Maguire.
Less than an hour a night.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a menopausal woman, so I don't sleep that much at night anyway, but it has been a very torrid week.
Well, you both look very well in it. And if you don't believe me, then a reminder that you can watch along on the Times YouTube channels as well. If it's not enough merely hearing our beautiful voices, you can see our beautiful faces. Just go to YouTube and search for PMQs Unpacked. Patrick, this time last week, PMQs, the Prime Minister confirmed he had appointed Lord Mandelson to the role of US Ambassador despite knowing about his friendship with the convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. He said also then he had full confidence in Morgan McSweeney. To paraphrase Ferris Bueller, life moves pretty fast.
Yeah, indeed. We weren't necessarily expecting PMQs last week to unfold in the way that it did, or the past 7 days to unfold in the way that they have. But Keir Starmer is still, somehow, Prime Minister. And today, I think he's likely to face questions about what he knew and when about making another appointment of a man who campaigned for someone who'd been charged with child sex offences to be elected as a councillor, and why he then put that person in the House of Lords. So, you know, same week, different week, same sort of territory somehow.
Yeah. Ayesha, before we kick off into PMQs, I want to ask you a bit about everything that's going on with Matthew Doyle. So Matthew Doyle, Lord Doyle, he's been suspended from the Labour Party. He was Keir Starmer's Director of Communications, previously worked for Tony Blair, sort of Labour staffer of long standing. He had an association, which he's apologised for, with Sean Morton, who's a former Labour councillor who admitted indecent child image offences in 2017. Gabriel Pogrund on the Sunday Times reported that Doyle campaigned for Morton, who was running as independent, after he'd been suspended from the Labour Party. Even though at that stage he'd been charged with a crime, he hadn't yet been convicted, but he had been charged. Ayesha, there's huge upset in the Labour Party about this. Explain a bit about how people are feeling and why this has become such a big deal. Obviously it should be a story, but why such a big one?
People are really, really angry about this. And when the peerage was announced, peers in the Lords, particularly in the Labour group, were completely baffled, because this story has been running in Scotland for quite a long time, because there's another woman called Pam Duncan Glancy. She is a member of the Scottish Parliament. She was on the front bench as a shadow education spokesperson. She was seen as a very, very good campaigner on disability rights. She too had a friendship with this Sean person. And she was sacked from the front bench and pretty much told that she wasn't allowed to stand again as an MSP. She has now been suspended from the party as well. And it looked very strange to people that there was a big kind of furore about this in Scotland, and this woman basically was sacked from the front bench and told she really couldn't stand as an MSP again, and somebody who's had the same friendship has been given a peerage. It just did not add up. So I think there was just bafflement at it in light of the Peter Mandelson story, and because, again, this is a very serious, this guy was convicted of very, very serious paedophilic crimes. What's happening in forget the vetting process. What's just happening? I mean, I don't want to be rude, but the nonce detector at Downing Street, this. I mean, I don't mean light of it, but what is going on?
Well, I mean, is it partly just sort of it's the boys' club thing? As in, if it's a guy who Keir Starmer knows, he gives them the benefit of the doubt. If it's a woman who none of them really know, well, she's done something wrong, let's just kick her out.
Well, that's sadly how it looks. Now, what I would say is that a lot of women have been speaking out about this. I know that a number of female MPs have made complaints about it, a number of women in the House of Lords. This came up at the PLP meeting on Monday evening. Keir Starmer will be meeting the Women's PLP. It's bound to come up again today. Now, the government moved to withdraw the whip from Matthew Doyle, but I think people will want him to go further and to say that in the same way that he's going to try and remove the peerage from Peter Mandelson, that the same should apply here, because it's just not a good look. At the same time, Labour women are trying to press the government to be really bold with its strategy against violence against women and girls and online pornography and paedophilia and all of that. It just does not look good.
Yeah. No, okay. But look, I'm sure we'll come back to that because I'm sure there'll be questions about it. Patrick, just before we go to the first question, one very specific question I wanted to ask you about what's been going on over the last week. Mm-hmm. When all the cabinet came out in support of Keir Starmer and basically bailed him out again after Sarwar had driven a hole into his boat, if we're going to stick with that metaphor, did they do that? Were they bullied into doing that, or were they just frightened of sinking the ship?
Well, look, bullied is the wrong word, and ironically, not that anyone in Number 10 would relish this comparison, there's a really striking similarity between what happened on Monday and what happened when James Pennell resigned from the cabinet in 2009. Now, what happened after James Pennell resigned from the cabinet in 2009? Everyone expected David Miliband to follow. But no, Peter Mandelson, when he's in Number 10, hitting the phones, saying, you've got to come out and say you're not going to challenge the Prime Minister, you've got to do this and that. And that a similar thing happened on Monday. But it was Amy Richards, the political secretary in Downing Street, and a war room of spads in the cabinet room who were basically saying, tweet your support for the Prime Minister, and they did. So
what surprised me about that is one can imagine when Gordon Brown was in that situation and Mandelson did that, one can imagine the menaces, the strength, this sort of Downing Street operation basically going, you guys play along or you are finished, because these were menacing guys and you had to operate like that. And one has had the sense until right now that Keir Starmer's operation, if it were ever like that, it certainly isn't now. This is a weak, floundering operation. How they managed to deliver that much menace to get all the cabinet to play ball?
Well, look, it needn't have involved menace. It involves a rational assessment of what might come next. And lots of members of the cabinet do not particularly like Wes Streeting. They're not enamoured with the way Wes Streeting has behaved over the past few months. And also, look, there's a sort of certain better devil you know thing. There was clearly no move coming from within the cabinet. Yeah. And the path of least resistance is let's stay and not necessarily try and control the Prime Minister, but let's see how this culture change in Number 10, this personnel change in Number 10 works out. The timing wasn't right for Wes Streeting, Angela Rayner, Ed Miliband or whoever else.
Very briefly, in a sentence from each of you, what's our first question going to be? Would you reckon? Or at least any question. What's the big theme going to be?
I think Matthew Doyle.
Yeah.
I suspect it will include the words Matthew and Doyle or Peter and Mandelson, yeah.
Let's find out. Let's get our first question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I associate my side of the House with the Prime Minister's words on the horrific stabbing in North London yesterday, as well as the shooting in Canada? When he was leader of the opposition, the Prime Minister said, and I quote, "I never turn on my staff. When they make mistakes, I carry the can." What changed?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I've accepted responsibility and apologised for the mistakes that I made. But let me say this, Mr. Speaker. Morgan McSweeney helped me change our party and helped me win a landslide election victory, which delivered for them the smallest Tory party in over 100 years. And what's her great achievement? To make it even smaller.
I mean, that's all right, I would say, as a response, and indeed as a question as well. The defence there, Patrick, of Morgan McSweeney, even in that question, he's not throwing him under the bus. He really doesn't want to.
No, he's not throwing him under the bus, although in private, I'm told the Prime Minister has been slightly less complimentary to Morgan McSweeney, particularly in conversations with Anas Sarwar and others. I think the word sacked may have been used in some of those conversations. But, you know, it's nice for the Prime Minister to not throw Morgan McSweeney under the bus in public, I suppose, but that is basically what ended up happening. Or Morgan McSweeney threw himself under the bus because I think he suspected the Prime Minister wouldn't necessarily complain if he did. What I think is striking, by the way, about Kemi Badenoch's line of questioning, that is a quote from Keir Starmer's 2020 leadership campaign when somebody asked at one of his first conferences, your head of comms, Ben Nunn, used to work for a private healthcare lobbying company, and he said that, and I have to say, the Prime Minister has not lived up to those words throughout his 6 years as Labour leader. He has thrown, basically the first sign of gunfire in a lot of cases, people who have worked very closely with him, people who slogged their guts out for him, under the bus, rather than live up to his own words. And I think we're now, and there are lots of people who have been in and out of Number 10 over the past 6 years, over the past 18 months and inside his office for the past 6 years, who were sort of raising eyebrows and, you know, sending not particularly PG or family-friendly text to that effect on Sunday after Morgan McSweeney went.
Ayesha.
I mean, I'd agree with what Patrick said. I mean, it was interesting at the PLP on Monday night, Keir Starmer was very careful to really pay tribute to Morgan McSweeney and say many of you wouldn't be standing here today had it not been for the, you know, political genius of Morgan McSweeney. I just wonder on that theme if Kemi Badenoch will press him further on Chris Wormald, the Cabinet Secretary, because last week she criticised. She said, "Look, the Cabinet Secretary shouldn't be responsible for giving out this information, this sort of secret information." And Keir Starmer really stuck up for Chris Wormald, the Cabinet Secretary, and sort of said, "Don't besmirch him. He's a great man." And this week we hear that he's going. So I wonder if that might be a bit of a theme as well. But I'm sure we're going to get to Matthew Doyle soon.
It's always a bit of a shock to hear him referring back to the massive majority he won, because I think we are apt to forget.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like he's got one, does it?
Absolutely.
Although he still does have one.
Yeah.
He still does. But I think
theory,
and that you know, I think it is important to remember that fact. Yeah.
Yeah. Question 2, if you please.
The whips have done a great job today. This is like the 37th. Oh, you said, yeah, exactly. Done a great job today getting them cheering. We all know that they've been sick for the last week. Because let's remember, Mr. Speaker, just last week, he told us that he had full confidence in his Chief of Staff, Morgan McSweeney. On Sunday, he sacked Morgan McSweeney. Last week, he resigned. Yes. Last week, Mr. Speaker, he was defending the Cabinet Secretary. Now he is sacking him. Yes. What changed?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, in January she said she had full confidence, 100% confidence, she said, be no more defections from her party. 48 hours later, the Shadow Foreign Minister defected. 8 days after that, the former Home Secretary defected. The only question now is, who's next? She needs to wake up. Her party is dying.
I think that's an answer we can call true but irrelevant. Good call there, Ayesha.
Thanks.
On the Cabinet Secretary there. But I mean, what changed is a pretty devastating question, isn't it? Because obviously nothing changed. Except his view.
I would say that I think what happened internally, I mean, I don't know really about Chris Wormald, although to be fair, there was a lot of briefing against Chris Wormald. Like Patrick's nodding his head, there was a lot of briefing against Chris Wormald, so that's been going on for some time. I think what changed is a lot of women in the Labour Party just said enough is enough. We're sick of this boys' club. We're sick of the sort of defending, the indefensible on Peter Mandelson and on the broader culture in Downing Street. I think that's significantly what changed, because that PMQs last week was so consequential. It was so consequential. And then the debate we saw afterwards, where we basically saw older women rising up, Meg Hillier, Stella Creasy, Angela Rayner, Polly Billington, just saying, we're not having this. You cannot have your Cabinet Secretary deciding which information you're going to keep back. That looks like a cover-up. So I think what we have really seen is the boys' club getting taken on by a lot of fed-up older women.
Right, fascinating. Patrick, the question of whether Morgan McSweeney was sacked or resigned, which was like sort of, she said sacked, everyone jeered, she said resigned. You're saying Starmer's been giving both of these answers himself.
Look, and the truth is, it was a constructive dismissal by some of the people Ayesha has been talking about, who made his position untenable. But also, if the Prime Minister really wanted Morgan McSweeney to stay, he would have said, no, I'm not going to accept your resignation. The conversation wouldn't have got to the point where Morgan McSweeney's resignation was being discussed. And that is, that's the reality. So it's one of those resignations that you could, I think, justifiably describe as at least a constructive dismissal. But it's interesting to hear the Prime Minister. One, Labour MPs denying that because lots of them are very happy that Morgan McSweeney's gone, and two, the Prime Minister, despite having promised a change in culture, and Morgan McSweeney, often mythologised, not least by myself and other journalists, probably not the sole author of the culture in the Labour Party. I think Ayesha would say it probably goes much, much deeper than one man. Yeah.
Well, let's get question 3.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister is demonstrating stratospheric levels of delusion if he thinks the problem is on this side of the House. And he didn't say anything about why the Cabinet Secretary is going. We know the truth. It is because he is throwing everyone under a bus except himself. And, Mr. Speaker, the Mandelson episode was not an isolated incident. A few weeks ago, he announced a peerage for one Matthew Doyle, his former Director of Communications. Immediately after that, the Sunday Times published on the front page that Doyle campaigned for a man charged with child sex offences. Yet, despite the Prime Minister knowing this, he gave Doyle a job for life in the House of Lords anyway. Why?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, Matthew Doyle did not give a full account of his actions. And on Monday, I promised my party and my country there would be change. And yesterday, I removed the whip from Matthew Doyle. I'll tell you what other action we've taken, Mr. Speaker. Along with the Safeguarding Minister, I and this government have introduced the most far-reaching violence against women and girls strategy. And I'll tell you what else we've done. This government has introduced a pay rise for millions of working-class women. What did the Leader of the Opposition do? She opposed it. This government's introducing greater protection for women at work. What did the Leader of the Opposition do? She opposed it. And I'll tell you what else she opposes. This government removing the disgusting rape clause that they put in place.
Ayesha, I wonder if he's just written himself into a bit of a problem there. He said Matthew Doyle did not give a full account of his actions. I'm not clear what it's even claimed the Prime Minister didn't know.
Again, I don't know all the ins and outs of it, but what I do know is that when that peerage was announced, people were really, really shocked and dismayed because, as I say, this story has been running in Scotland for quite some time about this individual and this association. And I think it is acknowledged that Number 10 is in hot water because they literally yesterday removed the whip after this PLP meeting on Monday, and you could sense that the sort of drum beats were getting louder in terms of people saying you cannot have a situation where we've just had this huge scandal with Peter Mandelson, and where I think an MP described it as Peter Mandelson Mark II. I mean, I think in order to sort of nix this, and to be able to talk about the important work that is going on that Jess Phillips is doing, that Jess Asato, others are doing in terms of violence against women and girls, they are going to have to not just remove the whip from Matthew Doyle. I think they are going to have to say we are going to try and remove this peerage, because you can't have somebody who this terrible association, and they're going to be a legislator for life. They won't have the Labour whip, but they're going to be a legislator for life and get funded by the taxpayer for life. That's not going to cut it with the public.
Patrick, when he says that Doyle did not give a full account of his actions, what can he be talking about?
Well, it's possible that the Prime Minister means, I'd say the Prime Minister probably means, look, the statement Matthew Doyle put out yesterday in which he apologised, etc., he said contact with Sean Morton did continue, I think he said on 3 occasions after he was convicted. Now, Downing Street refused to answer questions on that when the Sunday Times repeatedly put those questions to Number 10. It's possible he means that, but then, OK, say he means that. Or say he doesn't. I think some ministers have said today they weren't aware of the extent of Matthew Doyle's support after Sean Morton had been charged. It's quite hard to see. That line doesn't make a huge amount of sense to me. Kemi Badenoch's right. It was on the front page of the Sunday Times. There were pictures of Matthew Doyle wearing a T-shirt that said "Re-elect Sean Morton," after he'd been charged with possessing child sex abuse imagery, and and he was running as an independent councillor as well, which usually in the Labour Party is grounds to auto-exclude someone from their membership because you're not meant to campaign for a party that's not the Labour Party. So given they found out all of that, I think, in the middle of December, and Matthew Doyle wasn't
and
made
what was
appear.
happening in Scotland.
Yes, indeed, and the Pam Duncan Glancy stuff and all of that stuff. Given they found out on the 27th of December or whenever it was, and then Matthew Doyle made appear at the start of this month, you sort of think, what has actually changed?
Yeah,
is it is it a material difference in what you know, or is it just the political gravity or the political heat you're coming under? And it's quite hard to escape the conclusion that it's probably the latter.
Yeah. Look, a reminder, you can watch along on the Times YouTube channels if you wish to. Just go to YouTube and search for PMQs Unpacked. You will see us there. Lots of people commenting there. Lindwell Rain says, if I was Kemi, I'd be asking, so can we have an idea? So we can have an idea of who's leaving next. Who else does the PM have full confidence in? Which I think would be cruel, but could work as well. And lots of people complaining on there about how rarely Keir Starmer actually answers the question he has been asked. Let's get question 4.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister pretends not to know about Matthew Doyle. It was on the front page of the Sunday Times. He cannot explain why he gave this man a peerage, and I think they should be wondering why they're still cheering for him after that. And the Prime Minister, sometimes likes to claim, as he just did, that he cares about violence against women. The truth is, he only cares about the victims when he's trying to save his own skin. They can shake their heads. We saw it with grooming gangs. We saw it with Mandelson. And now we see it with Doyle. Isn't that what a former prosecutor would call an established pattern of behaviour?
Mr. Speaker, I'm going to take no lectures from the Tories in standards in public life. She defended Partygate for months and months and months. And even now she says it was overblown. The Shadow Foreign Secretary broke the ministerial code by bullying. Boris Johnson kept her. The leader of the opposition promoted her. She sits on her front bench. Her former Shadow Justice Secretary complained about not seeing enough white faces in Birmingham, and she was too weak to sack him for racism.
Yeah, I mean, again, they're talking about different things here slightly, aren't they?
Yeah, there's a lot of whataboutery here.
Yeah.
I think that's the politest and most accurate way to describe it. I'd be interested in what you think, Ayesha, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of engagement with the fundamental question here. And of course it's being asked by the leader of the opposition, who has a vested interest in making life difficult for Keir Starmer. I mean, he's made life hard enough for himself. But I don't think we've had a particularly clear answer on the Matthew Doyle thing. And yeah, I just think I'm not entirely sure this is making things any better.
Yeah.
I mean, I think what you're definitely seeing is clearly the PMQ strategy for today was it was going to be very difficult. She's going to come swinging hard on violence against women and girls and Matthew Doyle and all of this, go on the attack. I mean, that is clearly, they have got their charge sheet of everything that went bad with the Conservatives, and that's going to be the go-to. I think her attack line on him at the DPP is not quite fair, because look, things have not been, it's been a terrible, shameful week for the Labour Party, and I make no bones about that, but he did have a good record as DPP in terms of doing a lot to make the criminal justice system better, particularly for the victims of rape and things like that, and lots of women's groups have said that they worked very well with him. So I think at this point both of them are just kind of mudslinging.
Well, I mean, I think she'd be better off maybe leaving the DPP out of it. I thought that line, he only cares about the victims when trying to save his own skin, is actually quite devastating, because that is the pattern.
That's the political pattern.
Yeah.
He's not unreasonably stands accused of here.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm sort of looking at it from a perspective of somebody who writes about politics. That's a very well crafted line.
Yeah, that's a very, very difficult, that's a very deeply uncomfortable line. But I think what's fascinating, having watched him at the PLP meeting and then, obviously watching him afterwards, he is now in absolute, in order, defence is going on the attack. That is that's his mindset now. And she did concede, the Whips have done a good operation. The way the Labour Party is, because of, everything that's happened this week, they're around him at the moment. And his mindset is, right, I'm just going on the attack. I'm not going to concede anything, and that might be the wrong decision. But his mindset, and I think the team around him, is just, right, we've managed to Anas Sarwar's kind of galvanised support around the Prime Minister is all about attacking the Tories.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right. Look, lots of people still getting in touch on the DPP thing. Sean says on YouTube he can't have prosecuted many people if he believes every excuse, which is, I guess, one reason to raise it, I suppose. And Vincent says they should call it Prime Minister's avoidance time. He's cheating us out of the truth. Let's get question 5.
Nobody buys it, Mr. Speaker. Not even the Labour women, because they know he always puts the Downing Street Boys Club first. And how dare he criticise us? We weren't the ones stuffing government with hypocrites and paedophile apologists. He can't build a team, Mr. Speaker. He has no plan. He can't even run his own office, let alone the country. He is now dealing with a new scandal of appointing someone who campaigned for a man convicted of having indecent pictures of girls as young as 10. Isn't the Prime Minister ashamed that that will be his legacy?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, my legacy is changing my party and winning a general election. And I'll tell you this, I kicked my former leader out of my party. Her former leader, Liz Truss, broke the economy and has descended into bonkers conspiracy theories. I kicked her out of Parliament. She's too weak to kick her out of their party.
Tonally, this is all over the place. You've got Kemi Badenoch asking very focused prosecutorial questions about what the Prime Minister knew and what, and there's a consistent narrative here. Keir Starmer, understandably, by the way, given the enduring political weakness he's in, the party is in the mood to sort of give him the benefit of the doubt or a stay of execution. But this is just sort of throw anything about the Tories against the wall in the hope that Labour MPs behind you, who are still very uncomfortable with what you've said and done on various issues, say, well, at least, to sort of get too angry about this would mean giving in to those guys.
Yeah.
And we at least remember the Tories opposite us are bad. We're the Labour Party. We can't let them set the terms of British politics. But people are so angry behind the Prime Minister. It's a pretty high-risk gambit because the risk is he makes himself look indifferent or nonchalant about the issue at hand. And
that is sort of what he's doing. Ayesha, I may not have kicked out the Friends of Paedophiles, but I did kick out Jeremy Corbyn. I mean, that's like, come on, man. That's not going to help.
I mean, it is interesting. I think what you saw there at the end was his calculation. He and his team was like, OK, as I said earlier, we have got some noise behind us. We've got some sort of vocal support behind us. Let's bang out the kind of old-time religion in terms of the hits that the Labour backbenchers will cheer. So we're going to talk about the sleaze of the last Conservative government, pull the Liz Truss lever as well, because that always kind of activates people behind. But personally, I think he would have been better addressing the Matthew Doyle stuff more seriously and actually saying we are going to be looking to remove this peerage. And this is something that I'm sure will come up. As soon as he leaves Prime Minister's questions, he will go to a meeting of the Women's Parliamentary Labour Party. And this is something that women in the party are talking about. And I'm sure this issue he will get pressed on. Again, this is not going away, this Matthew Doyle issue.
But he's just not deft is the problem. It's why he can be quite frustrating to listen to. Why he wouldn't have answered that question by going, you know what, if that is going to be my legacy, I would be ashamed, and that's why I'm determined it won't be my legacy, blah, blah, blah,
and we're going to
blah.
bring through legislation. We're going to reform the laws. We're going to bring in legislation to kick out peers that don't deserve to be there. I'm going to absolutely make sure that happens.
And and if he just never can quite seize the moment. He's just got this that sort of robotic thing, which Kemi used to have as well, but seems to have developed.
Tell you what's really interesting. When at this very fabled PLP meeting on Monday at the beginning, it is the most in the moment, non-robotic, sincere I think anyone's ever heard Keir Starmer. He said sorry a number of times. You could almost hear a sort of crack in his voice about how clearly upset he was with himself. He apologised about the victims. He apologised to every single member of the PLP. He apologised to their family. He said, none of you got into public life to be shamed like this. It was a lot of raw emotion in the moment. Do it. And I think a lot of people in the room are like, can you not do that more outward facing?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen him speak in a small room, and he's a different man. And it will always sort of be, I guess, his tragedy as a performer that he just can't do that in these circumstances. Let's get the last question.
Mr. Speaker, he hasn't apologised for appointing Matthew Doyle because he won't take responsibility. He never does, and they know it. The Prime Minister is now telling everyone that he's never lost a fight. It's because he won't step into the ring. He's never lost a fight. He's walked away from welfare reform. He won't stand up to the unions. He won't stand up to China. He can't even stand up to Mauritius. He's had, Mr. Speaker, he's had 3 cabinet secretaries, 4 chiefs of staff, 5 director of communications in just 18 months. And now he is mired in yet another scandal. Does he ever look in the mirror and ask himself, is the real problem staring him in the face?
Mr. Speaker, I delivered a landslide victory for our government. Only 4 people have ever led the Labour Party to victory in a general election. I'm one of them. And she talks about numbers. Let us remember, Mr. Speaker, 5 prime ministers, 7 chancellors, 8 home secretaries, 8 foreign secretaries, 16 housing secretaries, all completely useless, all failed Britain, and this prime minister's clearing up the mess. She comes here every week desperately fighting to save her dying party. I'm fighting to change our country. Interest rates down, inflation down, waiting lists down, child poverty down, and I'll tell you another thing's down, the number of Tory MPs.
I always do feel myself doing a little involuntary shudder when there's call and response in the House of Commons. Patrick, let's talk a little bit about what Kemi Badenoch did today, because only one of them was shouting there and it wasn't her. She sounded very calm, but also, what can be... Over the year and a bit I've been doing this, what you notice about Kemi Badenoch is when she is poor, she's trying to be too clever. She's trying to ask complicated questions because she's got something in her mind that she absolutely wants to hit really hard. This wasn't that. This was really simple. None of these questions were heavy. None of these questions were complex. None of these questions required huge amounts of prior knowledge. It was a very straightforward bang, 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 bang.
Yes, it was. They were simple, short, sharp questions. The one thing that's on my mind, though, is last week she really did the Prime Minister like a kipper because she asked him a question he couldn't wriggle off the hook of. He had to say yes, he had known about Mandelson's relationship with Epstein when he appointed him. What her questioning today lacked, I think, was a similar sequence of what did you know and when. What was the thing you didn't know that you're now saying was sufficient to take the whip off him? And given off Matthew Doyle, off Lord Doyle, and given what you would have known, what the Sunday Times said you knew on the 27th December, why did you give him the peerage? She was making a broader critique, but there is a world in which Keir Starmer is not being cheered by at least half the Parliamentary Labour Party by the end of that, or they're cheering reluctantly, I think, if the questions are a bit more specific in what they're asking.
Yeah, I mean, he sounds rattled, right? He sounds very rattled, and yes, he's attacking hard, and he's bringing passion that you don't often hear from him. But he doesn't sound like a man who's winning the situation.
Well, look, let's be honest. It has been a really horrific week for the Labour Party and for him personally. I mean, this 7 days, when the history books are written, this is going to be an extraordinary 7 days where, you had this very, very difficult Prime Minister's questions 7 days ago. You had that sort of disastrous debate where in real time the government was doing that U-turn on the release of information around the Mandelson and Epstein documents. He potentially had Anas Sarwar triggering a sort of leadership contest just, a couple of days ago. So to quote Ed Miliband, he has been on the precipice. So he understandably, I think, looks rattled. Clearly, I think it's so interesting that his calculation is, I've just got to come out swinging. He's going to be thinking in his mind as well, this is not just about getting through PMQs. This is about the bigger messages with the by-election happening, with these unbelievably difficult local elections, which have just got harder, particularly north of the border. His general thinking will be like, right, I just have to go on the attack. I've just got to attack the Tory party. I've got to attack Zach Polanski. I've got to attack Nigel Farage. I've just got to go on the attack. That's what his thinking will be. But I do think... I think he is going to have to do something much more definitive on this question of Matthew Doyle.
A couple more comments for you. Jeff says, surprised Starmer hasn't mentioned the Suez crisis. Well, someone else saying, Sub-Commandant is his name, says Starmer in 2056 will still be blaming Liz Truss. Look, stick with us because these two are going to, in a moment, we'll be back with the best of the rest from the backbenchers. And welcome back to PMQs Unpacked. Now let's take a look at the other exchanges at Prime Minister's questions. First up, we have the Lib Dem leader, Ed Davey. Let's get his first question.
Mr. Speaker, to appoint one paedophile supporter cannot be excused as misfortune. To appoint two shows a catastrophic lack of judgment. The Right Honourable Gentleman once told this House that when a Prime Minister refuses to take responsibility, and I quote, "It only serves to convince people that things cannot get better, that governments cannot improve people's lives, and that progress is not possible because politics does not work." Does he still agree with himself? And does he share my fear that is exactly what is happening now?
Minister.
People in this country, millions of people, have been let down for years and years and years. And one of the reasons was austerity, which his party supported. He should take accountability and take responsibility for what he has inflicted on this country.
I'm not sure I've ever heard him so rattled.
Well, you won't like him when he's angry, and this is the version of the Prime Minister I'm sure was on show at PLP on Monday night, and also the one who is telling people he's going to fight and fight to win. He's never lost a fight in his life. It's really interesting hearing the Prime Minister direct that sort of anger towards Ed Davey, of all people. So yeah, rattled is one word. Resolute, you could use a slightly less pejorative version of that. But again, it's a furious political response. And look, for now, his audience is Labour MPs. That's the most important audience. But I don't know. It just goes to show that actually he's got that anger. It's a shield from having to answer the sort of more forensic questions on these sorts of cases, which would be probably be his undoing in this scenario.
I just sort of think you can respond with anger when somebody's talking to you with anger, but when you're the only one in the room shouting, it never looks good.
Absolutely. And also, Keir Starmer, by his nature, is not a naturally sort of shouty kind of guy, so it just feels like it's, he's not happy shouty person. This is not him in his happy place. And also it's difficult to kind of get shouty at Ed Davey, as you say, who's normally sort of a one-man fiscal stimulus for Thorpe Park. Like, it is kind of like very difficult to do that. And also, interestingly, it's interesting hearing Ed Davey go in so hard, because look, there is every chance that come 2029, there's got to be a deal between the Liberal Democrats and Labour. And Ed Davey's always quite careful to not really put the boot into Keir Starmer. He's quite fastidious about not doing that. So I think that's interesting, hearing the tetchiness between the sort of two men.
Have you also noticed as well, the more Keir Starmer shouts, the more he sounds like Rachel Reeves? Do you not get? Listen out for it next time. There's something very similar in intonation that he doesn't have normally, but when he gets cross, it suddenly comes out.
Yeah, well, I will keep an ear on that. They do have a very similar sort of slightly adnaudible voice, don't they? By the way,
I think it's a bit Ed Miliband.
Yeah.
It's a bit of the nasal.
Yeah, I've been hearing Jackie Smith on the radio earlier this week. I thought she sounded a lot like Rachel Reeves.
Everyone's morphing.
They've all got the same.
They've got the same voice coach.
They're all combining together like the Thunderbirds,
like a big anodoid,
into one giant Labour cabinet minister. Look, let's get the next question from the backbenches. This is from the SNP's leader at Westminster, Stephen Flynn.
Mr. Speaker, if I've just listened to the Prime Minister correctly, he's essentially rolled the same pitch in relation to Matthew Doyle as he did with Peter Mandelson, that they weren't clear with him. He appears to be the most gullible former Director of Public Prosecutions in history. But he has a slight problem, Mr. Speaker, because some of us do read the newspapers. And towards the end of last year, indeed on the 30th of December, having written to the House of Lords Appointments Commission, I received a response from the Chair, who advised me that as part of their vetting, they provide confidential advice to the Prime Minister on the propriety of a potential nominee. Will he release that advice?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I've made my position for clear. He knows how the system works. But, Mr. Speaker, he says he reads the newspapers. He will have read that in 9 days their former party chief executive goes on trial for embezzling money. And if he'll have read that the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, we see one of the worst failures in Scottish public life. Vulnerable children and adults put at risk. Evidence of serious warnings to the SNP government were ignored. He should have been looking at those, not looking at the newspapers. The First Minister should act, because families deserve accountability.
Well, look, I have to say, the Speaker, right after that question, admonished the Prime Minister for discussing a live court case, as he did there. MPs can do that in the Commons. They can use their position to do that, but we definitely can't do that on this show, so let's confine ourselves to the question.
I thought sort of slightly rum for a former Director of Public Prosecutions who would have brought cases of comparable sensitivity, political sensitivity, indeed did as DPP, to invoke parliamentary privilege to do that. But I guess that's a measure of the political trouble he's in.
Well, particularly when he's effectively what he's being attacked for in Flynn's question is his capability as a prosecutor.
Yeah, but also, by the way, that line on the HOLAC advice probably isn't going to hold, given the clamour for action and contrition and transparency for number 10, and I think also just the sort of weird, sort of slight inconsistency of everything the Prime Minister is saying about this appointment process. I think that's going to be the new call.
And picking up on your point earlier, I wonder if Kemi Badenoch slightly regretting not asking that question, because that would have been quite a good forensic thing for her to have asked.
Yeah, sure. Okay, look, we've got one more. Let's hear from the Scottish Labour MP Douglas McAllister.
It's a source of great pride to Scottish Labour MPs that as Chancellor, Gordon Brown lifted more children out of poverty than any other Chancellor before him. It's also a source of great pride that this...
Order. Mr Flynn, you don't need to go behind. I can still hear you. Your voice is louder than mine. Douglas McAllister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. It's also a source of great pride that this torch is now passed over to our government, and by removing the two-child benefit cap, we will lift more children out of poverty in a single parliament than ever before. 2,260 children in Western Bartonshire, 95,000 in Scotland. Does the Prime Minister agree that this demonstrates true Labour values in action across Scotland and the UK?
Well, on this side of the House, Mr Speaker, we know the damage that growing up in poverty does to the life chances of children. The Tories put hundreds of thousands of children into poverty, and they'll live with that for the rest of their lives. We are undoing their damage. Our decision will benefit almost 100,000 children in Scotland as we deliver the largest reduction in child poverty in any single parliament.
I mean, a cynic might suggest he'd been encouraged to read that question in a week when the party's leader in Scotland said the Prime Minister should stand down.
Very dare you.
Ayesha, what's going on with your people in Scotland?
My people. I honestly don't know, Hugo. I mean, I have to say, I feel very discombobulated by the whole thing. I mean, yesterday when I was in the House of Lords, there's a lot of Scottish Labour peers, and everybody just feels like their head is exploding because people really rate Anas Sarwar.
Yeah.
He is, like, by a country mile, the best leader in Scotland that we've had for a long time. He's articulate, he's smart, he's strategic, he's charismatic, he's brilliant. And so people are just... And also, it was felt that, he had really restored relations between Scotland and Westminster, this thing about the branch office, which was a big kind of criticism from times gone by. And it was felt that he and Keir Starmer had a very good relationship. So I think people are really devastated by this. But I still don't really quite understand what is happening. I'm actually going up to Scotland next week. I'm going to be spending a bit of time up there. I'm going to be doing some door knocking, seeing what because it's, I think as well, John Boothman, our brilliant Sunday Times Scotland correspondent, has made the point, and Kenny Farquharson's written a really interesting piece in today's Times as well, saying, I know all of this looks a bit mad, but just be careful not to look at everything through a Westminster lens. Isn't
the fundamental story here of what Sarwar did is that just really, in the final analysis, Scottish Labour and Westminster Labour are not on the same page, even when you're talking about the Scots in Westminster Labour. You know what I mean? In House of Commons Labour, and what Scottish Labour's got to deal with in Scotland in the Holyrood elections, it just doesn't even run concurrently to the agenda of Keir Starmer's government.
I think what's interesting about that is I think actually the ideology of Anas Sarwar and a lot of the new Labour MPs that got voted in, I think that is much closer to the Keir Starmer project as we've known it up until now, whatever that is. So, I mean, a lot of the Scottish Labour MPs, I wouldn't say they're Blairite, but they're quite on that. They're quite pragmatic. They quite like the politics of talking tough on things and not being too sentimental about things. So I don't quite understand. I mean, I don't know if there was more plotting and this was a James Purnell situation, which I remember very closely. I was working in government at the time. I don't know if more people were lined up and it was meant to be this big, coordinated effort, and there was meant to be a David Miliband type figure waiting in the wings, and that clearly didn't happen. Or I don't know if Anna Sarwar just decided, look, my calculation is, because this is playing out so badly for us in the doorstep, I'm just going to say what I'm thinking out loud and just be honest about it, and who knows the effect it's going to have, but I'm just going to get it all out. I don't know.
Patrick, Starmer's answer to that question, that little line he put in on this side of the house, we know the damage that growing up in poverty does. That's bang on the kind of Ed Miliband, we're going to make this all about class from now on.
Well, indeed, Ed Miliband said that yesterday. Keir Starmer reprised a speech he's given twice to the cabinet about how they're the most working class cabinet in history, and now Keir Starmer's saying that. So yeah, look, that is clearly the new mantra, class-conscious Labour Party. Some people would say that's the point. The difficulty for Keir Starmer is that until now he's not really shown any ability to connect with those voters in question, or that they believe him. And I think Ed Davies' line, does the Prime Minister agree with himself? That will be the political difficulty for this latest reinvention of the Prime Minister, that this is the authentic Keir. It's like, well, hang on. You told us the last one was authentic Keir, and the last one was authentic Keir, and the last one was authentic Keir. There have been so many different iterations of Keir Starmer that taking him at his word, particularly the public, are going to find that difficult.
But I think what we're going to see is, I remember doing a big thing with Keir Starmer many, many years ago when he had just become an MP, and I did a thing in his constituency with him, like an in-conversation. And it was one of the first events where he kind of really spoke from the heart about things. And I suppose that was a kind of a true glimpse into what his politics really were. And it's really soft left. He spoke really proudly about how some of the biggest achievements at that point, he was so pleased he'd campaigned against the death penalty. He'd taken on McDonald's in a big libel case. He wanted to support trade unions and the downtrodden and all of that kind of thing. And I think we are going to see a return to that type of Keir Starmer. I spoke to somebody who's very good friends with Keir Starmer in the run-up to that PLP, and they said to me, that is the Keir Starmer you're going to get back. That's actually what his true politics are. He's sort of been badly advised, and he's listened to people he shouldn't have done. He fell into the wrong crowd kind of thing. This is what... So I think we are going to see, as Patrick says, much more about class, much more about poverty, child poverty, and I think we're going to see the rise of the soft left again.
Yeah, no, I think it sounds a lot like you're right. Look, I'm afraid that's it from Patrick and Ayesha, and there's no PMQs next week because it's a short parliamentary recess. I'd imagine the Prime Minister will be very sad about that. Patrick, you can have the Wednesday off. We'll see you. We'll see you the week after, unless the Prime Minister resigns in the meantime, in which case you will be coming back.
I'll be back.
You can listen to Patrick Maguire's excellent podcast, The State of It, every Tuesday. This week's episode is a blinder, and you can hear Ayesha Hazarika every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday